Well, good evening. Thank you for being here. You're so quiet, like you're in church or something. Just relax. We had about 100 people here this morning, so I really thought we'd get like 8 or 9 people this evening. Thank you. I'm feeling a little bit like Taylor Swift right now, with 2 shows in one day, and we go. We had a little bit of difficulty with the technology, but our friend and wizard Don Nelson back there got us up and running here. Let's just center for a moment in prayer. Loving Christ, bread of life, wine of compassion, you broke yourself open and poured yourself out to become one with us, one for us, one in us, and one among us. Open our hearts to love as you love, to forgive as you forgive, to serve as you serve, and to break ourselves open and pour ourselves out for others, bringing your real presence to all God's people all the time. Amen. So, we're going to jump past the video for a minute. We'll start right here. The first memory of my first communion, I don't know, most of you probably remember your first communions. It's one of those big events. But one of the things I remember most about my experience with First Communion was that we all had to make these banners. We had to craft together these banners that when I was little seemed so big. It's probably that big now, but in my mind it's big. And Sister Mary Alice gave us all a sheet of scripture verses that we could put on our banners. We were going to have to cut out the letters out of felt and glue them on the burlap banner. And of all of the options she gave us, I chose "Do this in memory of me" to put them. And there's a little bunch of grapes and a chalice and a host, and then the words "Do this in memory of me." And I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but even as an 8-year-old, I was pretty deep, because I chose those words, "Do this in memory of me," because of all of the options on the sheet, it was the shortest. I would have to cut out the fewest letters and paste them, and that was how I made the decision. What was going to be easiest for Steve? But I was not. I was not very tidy, so I got some glue on the face of some of the letters that were on there, and Sister Mary Alice found this unacceptable. So I had to come back after school to redo it, and so that it was perfect in her eyes. And Sister Mary Alice and I had a bit of a interesting relationship. She liked my dad a lot. My dad was a carpenter, so he would go over to the convent and he would fix anything that needed fixed, repair things, just take care of things at the convent for the sisters. So she loved him, but she would have been an outstanding Pharisee because she really loved the Father, but she wasn't so sure about the Son. With good cause. But after my first communion, my parents hung this banner in our dining room, in our house. And it was there while I was growing up. Every time I walked through the dining room, I saw this banner, "Do this in memory of me." Now, my understanding of what that meant was nil. I mean, that the good news was Sister Mary Alice didn't assign an essay to explain your banner, because I couldn't have done it. I just did the thing, but even as I grew, right, as I went, into 10, 11, 12 years old, and seeing this always there and present as I walked through the house, I was like, what exactly does that mean? It's got to mean something more, right? As we go through, as we go deeper into it, and I think it means, I think it calls us to really ponder the question: what is the this we are asked to do? Do this in memory of me. And we take those words on the surface, but what is the this we are really asked to do? And I submit to you that it's four things. Jesus took the bread and the wine. He took these elements of creation, the gifts of the people placed on the table, the fruit of the vine, the work of the hands, gifts of God. Now, what happens when you operate a vineyard or you sow crops in a field and grow wheat, right? There's a collaboration there between you as the gardener, the vineyard worker, the farmer, and God, the creator. It's a mutual creative process. Because no matter how good of a farmer you are, you still need some help with things like sun and rain, that really make it grow and come to fruition. And so there's this collaboration. He takes this fruit of the vine and the work of the hands, of human hands, this bread, and he says, this is my body, this is my blood. So it's like, it's more than just the thing. It means something so much more than that. And he offers it up, that he breaks it open. He breaks himself open in doing so. And he pours himself out. And then he says, do this in memory of me. He gave himself to others. Broke himself open, poured himself out, and gave himself to others. When Jesus completes the foot washing in John's gospel, he says, "As I have done for you, you should also do. What I have done for you, you should also do." Is he speaking physically or directionally or both? Does he literally mean that we as disciples ought to routinely wash each other's feet? Wisely, we have interpreted this as a reference to his larger meaning: make yourself the servant of all. We would all agree that nurses, kindergarten teachers, and trash collectors, social workers, firefighters, and so many others are in fact modern-day foot washers. When we volunteer at the food pantry, read to residents in care facilities, help a stranger jumpstart his car, or bring cookies to a single mom, we are in fact washing feet. Likewise, when Jesus offers the imperative to do this in memory of me, is he talking about a literal, specific action, a directional way of life, or both? As Catholics, we readily embrace the narrower meaning, the literal, specific action. Thus we gather around a table and ritualize the recreation of the event. All's good. But there's a deeper, broader, and more profound message in the imperative, do this in memory of me. And it hinges on a spiritual pursuit of a simple question. What is the this we are being asked to do? Oh boy. The easy and obvious answer is exactly what we do on the surface. We gather in a room, invoke the Holy Spirit to turn bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ, and share it with each other. But as incredible and as beautiful as this can be, let's be honest. It's the easiest and narrowest adherence to the directive to do this in memory of me. In fact, this is so simple that we've decided even second graders can do it. As we grow in our spirituality, however, we seek a broader and deeper understanding of the mystery. What is the action, the do this, beyond the narrow scope? What did Jesus actually do that he's telling us to do? I submit he did and is instructing us to do these four things: to take the bread and the wine, offer up the fruit of our labors, the work of our hands, to bring that into community with others, and to break ourselves open as he did, and pour ourselves out as he did, and offer ourselves up to other people as he did. Do this in memory of me. Now it helps a little bit if we look at the language. Jesus spoke Aramaic. That was the everyday language, all right? It was very closely related to Hebrew. Hebrew is a formal language used primarily within the synagogue and the temple. But the everyday street language he would have used with his disciples was Aramaic. And Aramaic is what linguists would call a conceptual language. It's a little bit of a stretch for us because our Western languages, our Latin-based languages, such as English, are what we would call denotative languages. Our words denote specific things, and we take those specific elements and we put them together to build and communicate ideas, concepts, from the ground up. Aramaic, as a conceptual language, flows in the other direction. Everything starts with a bigger idea. And then how it applies specifically depends on the context and so, and what you're referring to in the moment. So there's some interpretation on the part of the listener to figure that out. A lot of Eastern languages, if you've ever, Mandarin, for example, a lot of Eastern languages are much more metaphorical. They're much more conceptual language. In the West, we're used to these literal denotative languages. Now, a couple words we want to pay attention to are Dhamma and Lakma. The word Dhamma in Aramaic, and I don't want to make you think that I know this because I'm borrowing it from an Aramaic scholar. His name's Neil Douglas Klotz, and he's done all of the scholarship on this, and he's a very well-known Aramaic scholar of the ancient languages. But Dhamma is the Aramaic word for meaning conceptually the flow or the essence of life. In Hebrew, the word would have been dam, D-A-M. In Aramaic, it's dhamma, D-A-M-A. And interestingly, the root is the same root as is used in the word Adam. You can see the same letters, same sounds from dhamma to Adam. Adam the first person created in the story in Genesis of God creating human life and breathing the essence, the flow of life into humanity. Now, the ancients, put yourself 2,000 years ago in the Middle East, they didn't know a lot about biology, anatomy, how things work. But they knew that if you took a grape, which was pretty good, picked it from the vine, and it was healthy and vibrant and alive, and they knew that if you squeezed the juice out of it, the juice that came out was still healthy, vibrant, flavorful, and alive. And in fact, if you treated it properly, it became even better. You could ferment it, it could become wine, you could keep it, and there was the vitality flowed through the juice in the vine, through the liquidity, if you will. They also knew that if you took a human person and you cut them and the blood ran out, or a goat or a calf or whatever it might be, that they would die. That the flow of life in the blood or the juice, the Dhamma, is what provided the essence of life itself. So this word Dhamma, didn't mean only blood or only wine. It meant blood, it meant wine, it meant the essence of life, the flow of life, it meant Adam, the flow of life. And whether you were talking specifically about one thing or another, depending on what you're pointing to at the time, but it was a concept, this idea. The other word we want to look at is the word lakma, which conceptually meant the husk, the flesh. So back to the grape. It's full of nutrition, it's refreshing, fills you up. You can squeeze the juice out, but if you squeeze the juice out and you leave what remains, that, unlike the juice which can become wine and better, will die, will wither and die. So there's this word of, which we would think of lakma, perhaps, as substance of life, the stuff that we're made of, created from. And it means human flesh. It means the husk of the grape. It means the meat on the bone. It's a concept. The essence and the substance. So when Jesus takes this, go back here. When Jesus takes this bread and this wine, the Dhamma, the wine, and the lakma, he's taking the essence of life itself. He says, this is everything I am. This is who I am. This is what I'm all about. This is everything I've taught you, everything I believe in, everything I've exemplified to you, all of the life that has flowed through me to you. All of the love we shared, all of the time we spent together, everything that puts us in physical, earthly, temporal presence with each other. All of that. I'm taking all of it and I'm breaking it open and I'm pouring it out and I'm offering it to you, saying, this is who I am. All of it. The substance and the essence of my life. Now, the people with whom he was speaking in that upper room, they would have understood this. They would have, because they would know that he wasn't necessarily talking about the thing, denotative language, the wine or the bread. He was talking about everything that the fruit of the vine and the work of the hands. The co-creation of offering up everything we do and everything we are and bringing it together and sharing that and breaking it open, pouring it out and sharing it with each other. That's what he's offering up. And boy, doesn't that mind shift how we think about what we do at Mass. Suddenly, it's like, suddenly offertory is so much more than a collection. We're not just funding the light bill. Because what are we doing? We're offering up the fruit of our vine, the work of our hands, and bringing it forward as part of the offertory gifts. So they can be offered up, broken open, poured out, and shared with others. Stress does unfortunate things to our bodies. It raises our blood pressure, upsets our digestion, causes insomnia, disrupts our sex drive, increases depression, and causes us to binge watch old episodes of the Beverly Hillbillies. Not good. It also messes with our brains. Stress gremlins override hormone production levels and scramble our circuitry. They're like prankster high school kids in a 50s era comedy. Bottom line, stress and anxiety cause us to be self-focused, self-absorbed, and self-protective. Our brains respond to stress the same way they respond to illness. When we feel sick, such as when we have a bad cold or the flu, our overriding response is to cocoon. We want to isolate from everyone, wrap ourselves in a blanket, curl up in bed, and watch Netflix. Our relationship with others become primarily needs-based, and we expect them to respond to our need for peace and quiet, our need for a glass of water, our need to be left alone. When most of us are under the weather, we naturally feel a little self-entitled. That's how we're built, and for good reason. We are hardwired to prioritize self-care at those times so we can return to health. Likewise, we are predisposed to self-isolate so as not to infect other members of our household or tribe. Thus, when we're ill, we give ourselves full permission morally and socially to live selfishly. Increasingly, however, we seem to generalize this response to all of life's inevitable discomforts. When we're injured, when we're frustrated, when we're stuck in traffic, when we're annoyed, when the line is too long at Starbucks, when we're offended, when our egos are threatened. Basically, whenever the earth doesn't spin to our liking, we recoil within ourselves and focus on self-interest. Our response to all these stressors is to prioritize self-comfort. And we live with a lot of stressors. Good high school coaches tell their players that maturity is achieved when we learn to be comfortable with discomfort. Only then will our mind stay focused even though a cold rain is falling or our legs are tired. This is an important part of teamwork. It's how we continue to serve the interests of the group while setting aside personal self-interest. Living in real presence with one's teammates, one's coworkers, or one's spouse means being fully present to the needs of the whole, even when the cost must be paid in the currency of self-sacrifice. The life lessons in this are obvious. By the way, they're also what the image of a crucifix represents. It's what this whole faith is ultimately about, the willingness to break oneself open, bodily, mindfully, and spiritually, to accept and even embrace personal vulnerability in order to be one with others, one with God. Perhaps most compellingly, this is what it means to love. And it is at the same time the most challenging and the most rewarding, the most human and the most sacred of all life experiences. Jesus' words, "Do this in memory of me," present us with a much bigger task than we're often comfortable admitting. He's asking us to break ourselves open as he did and to be vulnerable as he was. That's hard. That's really hard. Pinned against the earth under the weight of stresses and anxieties, we'd rather be self-protective, self-defensive, self-interested, and self-advancing. Break ourselves open? Be vulnerable? No, thank you. No wonder we're comfortable reducing Eucharist to an object rather than an action, to a wafer rather than a way of life. It may be safer to stop at merely receiving the Eucharist, but it's so much more enriching and rewarding to receive, become, and share the Eucharist. So, one of the themes that you've heard me preach about, and you may have read me you've read some of the things I've written, is this idea of being very mindful of the direction of our life flow. All right? Let me wrap a story around that. I was in my study one Saturday morning, a number of years ago. And there was someone at the door, so I got up and I answered, and there was this young man out there, and he was taking a poll. He had a clipboard and a name badge that said something so that I would trust he's a pollster, I guess. Trust a pollster. Anyway, so he said, I have quick poll. I have just one question. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? All right, so I stepped back, and the only good reason to have a beard is to do this, right? So I stepped back and I went, I said, well, let me think. I've learned a lot. I've grown some. I've had to overcome some challenges. I love more. So yes, I'm better off than I was 4 years ago. And he looked at me with this total blank face, marked something on his clipboard, and backed away slowly. And as he left, I thought, what an odd question. When did we start this? When did this become the litmus test? Are you better off? And we can trace it to 1980. We can trace it to 43 years ago, when Ronald Reagan first introduced it on the campaign trail. The question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And it seemed like such a reasonable question. But how different is it from 20 years prior in 1961, when John F. Kennedy famously said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Because in the case of JFK, he's assuming that the flow of our lives is outward, that we are here to serve. A servant ethos. Ask what you can do. What gifts do you have? What time, what resources do you have? What do you have that you can actually affect the life experience of other people around you. And then in 20 quick short years, right, a generation, barely, we reverse that to, are you better off than you were? Are you getting what you want? We shifted from a servant ethos to a consumer ethos. And stop and think about that. Because now we are so embedded with this idea that the way to live, and you want to talk about why do we have all of these stressors? We have all of these stressors because we have bought into this idea that our well-being, our happiness, our joy is dependent on whether we're getting the experience we're hoping to have. And so we're all preoccupied with reshaping the world around us to fit accordingly. That flow of life is responsive. How do I get what I want? As opposed to how do I give what I can? Because the flow of life that Eucharist introduces us to, this idea of break yourself open, pour yourself out, and offer it up to the world around you. That is a flow of God's love, God's life, that just as it did through Christ himself, from the Creator, from God, to us, through us, and outward into the world. And we are so busy living in the other direction, trying to shape the world to our liking rather than trying to understand how God is asking us to participate in bringing his love into the world. So if we're going to really live out the substance and the essence of Christ and this gift, where do we go with that? We need to look at our relationships with our Creator. Go back to the 7th grade or 8th grade or whenever you had it in your English basic introduction to literature. What are the 5 central conflicts? They mirror the 5 central relationships that we have. Relationship with God as our Creator, relationship with self, relationship with others, relationship with society, and relationship with creation. Those 5 things. So if we start with the direction of life's flow, what direction is life flowing for me in each of these relationships to actually live out a Eucharistic way of life? So in our relationship with God, our real presence, how are we bringing the real presence of Christ to us, through us, and into the world? How are we doing it? Do we seek servitude, that servant ethos, or do we seek self-affirmation, coming back to me, that consumer ethos? How are we dealing with that in our relationship with God, in our prayer? There's a story coming up. I want to say it's on Wednesday morning in our scriptures this week. It's the story of the Pharisee and the poor man in the synagogue. The poor beggar is humbly sitting there in the back saying, "Lord, have mercy on me." And the Pharisee's prayer is, "Thank you, God, for making me special," and not like this poor beggar. But there's a phenomenal line in there in which Jesus, when telling this parable, mentions the Pharisee said these words to himself and then goes on with his prayer. And think about that. He said these words to himself. How often are our prayers, how often when we pray to this God, how often are we really praying to ourselves? And I think sometimes we wonder, what am I doing here? How often do we start with the conclusion, here's what I want you to do, God. Here's how I would like creation to be, how I'd like the world to work around me, so that it would just be easier for me a little bit. I wouldn't maybe hurt or suffer. Please do this. When we start with our conclusion, what is the direction of the flow of God's love in that prayer, the real presence? Are we seeking service? Are we thinking, here I am, Lord. You are the potter, I am the clay. You use me. Yes, there are people hurting. How can I comfort them? Yes, there are people who are poor. How can I serve them? There are people in my neighborhood, on my block, in my family. There are people that are your people, created in your image and likeness. How can I share your love with them? It's a powerful prayer. Help me serve you. Help me share your love in the world. To use our prayer to align that flow of God's love in our lives. Second relationship is the relationship with self. Are we seeking in our own pilgrim journey through this life, are we seeking enriching growth, or are we seeking self-protection? That's a tough question. Are we seeking enriching growth? Are we seeking to go deeper and deeper and deeper? Or are we just trying to look out for ourselves? One person said to me one time, well, I just want to get to heaven. Isn't that what this is all about? I'm like, no. It's not about you getting to heaven. It's about you and all of us together actualizing the kingdom of God. Is this all just are you serving yourself here? Salvation, self-serving salvation, right? Are you just serving yourself through all of this? Or are you really looking to grow deeper, more profoundly, broader, to touch the lives of other people and let them touch yours? How is that working out on your personal journey to grow deeper and more profoundly as we go along? The third relationship is our relationship with others. Are we companioning, or are we self-advancing? Through all of our relationships with other people, are we here to companion them, or are we self-advancing? When I'm from the 1900s, from the 1980s, when I first started my career. And all of the advice at that time, and I don't think it's a lot different, honestly. Here we are 40 years later. I don't think it's a lot different. All of the self-help, professional development books, and gurus talk a lot about networking. And back in the 1980s, it was make sure that you make contact and form friendships with people who can help you advance your career. And even back then I thought, isn't that kind of objectifying people? Isn't that kind of just using them? How come none of the professional advisors were saying, go out and find people who can benefit from your gifts, what you have to offer, and share it with them, free of charge. Just go build friendships and relationships by giving of yourself, rather than thinking about advancing yourself. Again, the direction of the flow of God's love, the real presence of Christ working in the world through us? Are we companioning people on their journeys, or are we looking mostly to just advance our own? Which direction is Eucharist flowing in our lives? Then we have this relationship with society. Are we here to serve the many, or the few, or the one? When we look at the whole community of people, I was at a conference a number of years ago, and a theologian from Loyola University in Chicago, a really good Jesuit college, and this guy is not Catholic, and we were in a social hour, and he said to me, "You know what the problem is with all you Catholics?" And I, oh boy, a little too much social hour, sir. He says, "Let me tell you what the problem is with all you Catholics. You all want to recreate your church in your own image." I'm like, holy cats, was he right? Everybody wants the church to be the way they want it to be. Everyone thinks, oh, we need more of this, less of that. We need more of what my church was like growing up. We need more of what I want it to be. Without thinking, wait a minute, just take a step back. In my relationship with society, I don't care if you're talking about the workplace, or you're talking about the church, or you're talking about your neighborhood or society in general, are we looking to serve the many? How can we bring forth the body of Christ in a way that resonates and touches hearts, that lifts lives? Or are we looking for the few, just me and my family, or the one, just me? How is this all serving me? Am I getting what I want? Servant ethos or consumer ethos? Is God's love offered to me, broken open, poured out, and given to me, flowing through me? Or am I expecting it all to flow to me? What is the direction in our relationship with society? And then finally, our relationship with creation itself. The Franciscans, and if you look at Franciscan theology, going back to St. Francis, if you've seen the statues of St. Francis, he's always depicted with a bird, because he was a huge nature lover. The Franciscans teach and believe that the act of creation, going back to the story of creation in Genesis, the God breathing life in the Adam, the Adama, the flow of life, the act of creation itself is the first incarnation. All of creation is sacred in the minds of the Franciscans because it is the very physical manifestation of God's own life-giving, life-flowing breath into existence. And that the arrival of Jesus is the second incarnation. Always. That's a little Franciscan theology. So we have to ask ourselves, in our relationship with creation, are we harmonious or are we exploitative? If we're looking to be in harmony with all God's people, all God's creation, unity, spoken differently, communion, and if we're really looking to live in communion with one another and with all creation, we would be seeking harmony with all, acknowledging, valuing, raising up the sacred dignity of all God's creation. Or are we seeking to be exploitative? What can I get out of it? How's it serving me? How can it lift me up and raise me up? Five really good, I think, contemplative questions. I don't think that they're easy questions. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm in a better place with any of this than you are, because we have days in which we're pretty good, and we have days when we're not so hot. And the difference often is the amount of stress we're feeling in the moment. What's going on? Where are we trusting? And the correction is always Eucharist. The inflow of Christ himself, broken open, poured out. The substance, the essence of Christ's own self, broken open, poured out, and given to us so that we can do this in memory of me. That we can do the same. Break ourselves open, pour ourselves out in real presence to one another and to the world around us. While I prefer to retreat to the lush richness of the forest or the quiet vistas of the mountains, Michelle will occasionally lure me into a hike in the desert. This is a very different experience, with no trees, no canopy. The reality of my vulnerability rockets to anxiety level as soon as I get beyond sight of my car. The initial temptation to walk 50 yards, turn around, and call it a day is a powerful attraction. Why on earth would I want to walk farther away from shade, farther away from water, and farther away from the twin miracles of cold beer and pizza delivery? The hot sun, the parched earth, and the unseen dangers of rattlesnakes and scorpions take a neon highlighter to the fragile reality of human life. No, thank you, my brain says. Ah, but yes, please, my soul calls. So I journey on, but at a much slower pace than Michelle. Soon I lose sight even of her. After about 2 miles, the anxiety burns itself out like a cheap candle. Alone with God in the emptiness of a desert, life's stresses, pressures, doubts, and falsehoods are vacuumed out of me. I awaken to the realization that the sky is real, the earth is real, and love is real. Everything else is exposed as illusion. Deeper into the peace of nothingness, I finally emerge into the fullness of allness. Peace be with you, Jesus said when he entered the upper room. Peace be with you, we say before sharing Eucharist. The peace of real presence. This is where we find our Holy Communion, our sacred unity with God, neighbor, and all creation, now and forever. When we are able to live in communion with God, with self, with others, with society, and ultimately with all of creation, we are able to live in peace, harmony, and love. The gift of Eucharist opens our eyes and our hearts to this reality, not only as a future heaven, but as the real presence on earth as it is in heaven. Jesus, of course, understood this. He also understood that this Holy Communion is not something we can know intellectually. It is something we are blessed to engage in experientially. Do this in memory of me. My friends, we are at time. How fast it goes when I'm having fun. We'll come back tomorrow night. tomorrow morning and tomorrow night, for different presentation, different material. We'll cover some other things we might have teased a little bit tonight. But in the meantime, we're here. I have nowhere to go. So any thoughts, any questions, any debate? Yes. So John's gospel is the only one that has the foot washing story in it, right? And that's the story he tells. And I think what he's really doing. John, of course, wrote his gospel last of the four gospel writers. I think most scholars believe that John wrote between 90 and 100 AD. So really think 60 years after Jesus' death. And at this point, the temple had already been destroyed by the Romans. Hope was lost. Where do we go? Being a Christian had become dangerous. Gathering in a room and breaking bread, and it had become something that maybe you could do, maybe you couldn't do. But I think what John is interested in instructing us all to do is, how do we live as Christ taught us? How do we take this idea and put it into action? So he uses the Christ as foot washer and the installation of washing of the feet. And of course, it wasn't actually John. It would have been one of John's disciples. So these gospels were written by people who had never actually met Jesus. But so we can only guess why he did that. But I think we have to look at when he wrote and the context in which he wrote, and who he was writing for. And he's trying to give hope to and instruction to people who were following this teacher, but had to do so rather secretively. So we can do that, right? I mean, we can all be foot washers. It's not easy to do. It's not, but we can do that whether it's safe to gather in community or not. We can still live that life and do that. Is that it? I get off easy? Yes.
So you were talking about like the stress in life and how that impacts, like how it's like bad impact in many respects. And then I started thinking about how fascinating it is where, when you have those young people, ones who are in their 30s, who say, oh, retirement is wasted on those older people because I want to do all these things and it would make sense to work when you're older. But then when you get to that retirement age, you're like, wow, I am just too tired and aching and sore to keep doing what I was doing. But the fascinating part of all of that is it seems like getting rid of the stress of all that work stuff actually takes you into a better mode in terms of being able to give more of yourself. So I think it's like, and it sounds crazy, but it's kind of like the leading up to death, like it's not like you're trying to, I gotta hurry up into heaven, but it's kind of like now I can keep working on all that good aspect of the flow. Instead of it coming to me, now I can, let's face it, what do people talk about? Like, oh, what are you going to do when you retire? Oh, I'll probably volunteer. When you think about it, it's kind of funny how it's like that aging process and getting rid of that stress really takes you to that better place.
So the question, I don't know if you were able to hear it in the past, in the back of the room. The question, and I'm going to paraphrase, forgive me, but the question is, there is so much stress that distracts us, and young people today are saying, retirement is wasted on the tired, and why can't I, when I'm young and vibrant, do what I want and volunteer and do the good things, and why do I have to wait until I retire? And and that's the reality. Once we retire, we have more freedom to do those things. And to all of that, I would answer, look, I've been working for 40 years, right? And nothing has held me back from breaking myself open, pouring myself out, and offering myself to other people. That stress happens because of the flow coming the wrong way in our lives. We are conditioned or programmed, or we choose. Let's be honest, it's a choice we make, whether we make it consciously or subconsciously. Most of us make it subconsciously. We choose to look at our work that we do as something that is placed upon us as a burden in order to sustain our lives. We choose not to look at it as an opportunity to use my gifts, my talents, my time, my resources, while I have vibrancy and aliveness to do something positive and good and put something wonderful in the world, to touch other people in a way that is deeply meaningful. So we end up with all of this stress because we're saying, from my work experience, I'm not getting what I want. From my job, I'm not getting what I want. We're all going to have days like that. If you've raised kids at all, you've looked at your kids sometimes and said, you ain't giving me what I want. And so that's part of life and working with each other is constantly being challenged to look at whether we're giving the love of Christ through ourselves into the world or taking it back. I've got this book coming out in May on exactly this topic, reimagining vocation. Live like you mean it. And this idea that there is no point of time ever when we are victims of our own lives, if you will. So I know in raising my children, I never talked to them about looking at their own education and development as professionals in whatever line of work they choose as something that they're doing to get something out of. I always talk to them in terms of taking an inventory of your talents, your abilities, your passions, and looking at how they can serve the world, and then going out and doing that. So I think that so much of the stress that we're bringing home from work, but let's be honest, we work with people who are also, most of our workplaces right now, as a result of now a second generation, 40 years in this consumer ethos, most of our workplaces now are really nothing more than people passing stress around to each other. And it's like, let me move through, the wrong stuff is moving through us, right? Instead of taking our giftedness, our resources, offering them up, breaking them open, pouring them out, and sharing them with other people. Because you worry a lot less. There's a lot less stress when your focus is on how am I putting good in the world? How am I affecting the lives of other people in a way that raises them up a little bit, eases their burden, makes their lives a little better in this moment, on this day. That's it. And you don't have to wait to retire to do that. Now, when you do retire, there's a whole chapter in this book on what I call vocation of the moment, right? The idea that we have vocation can change and evolve, and when we retire, we have different opportunities to live a vocation differently. But I'm really fixated on the idea of the wisdom stage of life, right? Because there are things that we can do as we age that we couldn't do when we were younger because we were idiots. We just didn't know. We didn't have the life experience to grow and become wise. So the question becomes, as we age, as we retire, and we can reflect on things from a different perspective of wisdom gained from life experience, that our vocation can shift and toward wisdom. So I don't know if any of that's helpful at all, but it's a really important question. And that will discourage anyone else from asking questions. If I ask a question, I'm going to get an answer like that. Anybody else? Thank you so much for being here. I hope to see you tomorrow night or tomorrow morning, and we'll talk about some other things.